Hello, Degrassi fans, and welcome to the Degrassi Kid podcast for a special episode about the Degrassi Kid Network. As you guys know, for the last year or so, I've partnered with different fans in the Degrassi fandom who create projects about their love for the show. We've partnered with three podcasts in particular named Degrassi Schools In, hosted by Evie, New Year, New Look, New Podcast, hosted by Annalie, Nathan, and Alana, and Bruce Mackey's Library, hosted by Mix Lucy. Throughout the year, thanks to your Patreon donations, we've supported them throughout creating their episodes. They've created podcasts where they read through the history of Degrassi books, where they create Degrassi character playlists and share the Spotify links directly with you, or like Evie, who is watching through Degrassi Junior High for the very first time. Thanks to your support, their podcasts have been able to flourish and grow over the last year, and now their audience has grown to include you. While I will forever support their fan projects and be friends with them until the end of time, I have decided that for 2025, we're going to try something new. These three podcasts will no longer be appearing on the Degrassi Kid Patreon, with some exceptions that we'll talk about later. And instead, this year, we're going to be meeting some brand new Degrassi fans who I believe you may not have met before, or you may not know their story of why Degrassi means so much to them. Going forward with the Degrassi Kid Network, we're going to be introducing you to brand new Degrassi fans and also throw some of our support towards their projects and help them grow. I will forever support the three podcasts who have supported me endlessly, and I will continue to share their podcasts with you and collaborate and work with them on all the projects that they have in mind for 2025. I will forever be a champion of all of the hard work that they've done, and this isn't about ending our relationship together. Instead, it's saying, hey, I think I've done everything I can to help you. Your podcast has a loyal fan base. You've been able to work on some really incredible ideas this year, and I just don't think you need me anymore. I am very proud of these podcasts for all that they have accomplished in 2024. I wish them the best in 2025. I'm sure I will appear on their podcasts, and I'm sure we will see them again. But for now, you can go follow them on their own social media and follow their growth as they continue through their podcast through the rest of 2025. And together, we'll meet some new Degrassi fans who maybe haven't been fortunate enough to get a lot of attention thrown their way. How great that we can work together to celebrate people who love this show and maybe just need a little bit of a boost to have their projects more seen in the community. So today we are sitting down with one of our podcasts, Bruce Mackey Library, hosted by Mix Lucy, to talk about how they became a fan of the show, what their goals are with their podcast, and how you can continue to support them and find them in 2025 as they continue their podcast mission. As a Degrassi fan, let's hang out with Mix Lucy, otherwise known as James, and talk about Bruce Mackey's Library. What I would love is for you to just give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and who you are.
I go by Mix Lucy because I am non-binary and my pronouns are they, them. I'm just very enthusiastic about books in general, but especially Degrassi, as it is my favorite show. I just always wanted to be like someone who helps people. And for me, the most helpful thing is books and reading. They help me find a community and learn about the world around me. So what better way to express my love of the show as well as my love of reading and help people find Degrassi books.
I love that. And will you tell everyone for us the story of how you got into Degrassi?
I got into Degrassi 100% by accident. We had just gotten cable for like the first time in around 3 or 4 years, and we had switched networks. So I was scrolling through the channels, just trying to figure out what was where. And I saw Adam on screen, and I didn't know what I was watching at all. I didn't remember the name of the show. I didn't see it on the screen. So I just saw Adam, and I was really excited about it to see someone who kind of reminded me of myself and what I was going through with my body images. Then I kind of like lost cable a few months later. That's kind of how we grew up. We grew up very poor with divorced parents. I found it a few years later when I was kind of in the church and going through a lot emotionally with my grandma who had a couple of strokes. I was looking for queer media, something just to help me find a community. When you're in a church in the South, it is hard to do that. So I asked Google for some queer shows, and it said Degrassi. And I didn't realize I was watching the same show again until I got to My Body is a Cage. And I saw that exact scene, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow. I've heard, because I know you so well, I've heard that story a few times, but it always makes such an impact on me because to know that you went from that to now being such a huge fan and hanging out in the Discord and having your own Degrassi podcast, like that's such an incredible growth experience. I love that for you. What caused you to start your own podcast, the Bruce Mackey's Library podcast?
I think it was during the pandemic, I had found your podcast. And I got to the second episode when you were talking about building your collection. And you mentioned this small word of you had gotten a few books. And the word books, as you can tell, sparked this thing in me of like, oh, there's Degrassi books. And I went and searched for them. I found them on thrift books and eBay. And I have like this whole, let me see, this whole library right here,
I love that.
shelf of nothing but Degrassi books, even some in French. I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in wanting to know more about this secret side of Degrassi that is not really talked about much. I did find one other podcast that talked about the books, but they stopped after the junior high character books and they only did those
Oh.
ones. And I wanted to know more.
That's so sweet that I'm part of your origin journey. How did you go from, you're hearing a podcast, you're hearing someone like me talk about the books, to then ending up in a space where now you have a podcast called Bruce Mackey's Library? Can you tell me about the name, how you officially made that jump? Why does that connect with you?
A lot of it was discussed with Evie, just seeing her grow into schools in and that confidence that she gained from it. I really felt like maybe I could do it. Maybe I wasn't alone in the whole new podcasting journey, as well as Bruce Mackey being a queer librarian and he calls himself a queer.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm one of those. I'm non binary, I'm sapphic, I'm too queer. And I want to be a librarian, and he was one. So that really inspired the name for me. And he was the one who gave the book to Linda that became Ida Makes a Movie the episode.
Oh, I know, such a cute name for a podcast. I love Bruce Mackey so much for the exact same reasons you listed. For context, anyone who isn't familiar with the story, though I feel like everybody's familiar by now. Long story short, Bruce Mackey was Linda Schuyler's best friend. They worked at a school together. She was a teacher. He was a teacher and a librarian. He had ordered in books about filmmaking to help Linda make her movies, and he had ordered a book called Ida Makes a Movie and did not know that it was a children's book and originally said, "Oh, this is silly. This is going to help. I'll send it back." And Linda said, "No, no, no. That's going to be my movie. That's going to be the first episode of Degrassi, as we now know it." And Bruce also is the one who lived on 98 Degrassi Street and opened up his house. So when it came to create a title, well, it was about a bunch of kids. They lived on Degrassi Street, and we had the kids at Degrassi Street. All thanks to Bruce Mackey, the librarian. If someone was going to check out your podcast for the very first time, maybe they listen to this and then they go check out an episode, what do you think they're going to like about your podcast and take away from it?
I think they'll take away a lot of history and how deep I go into that because I'm a big history nerd, to be honest. And Tom Melissa's told me that I'm very passionate and such a sweetheart. And I do cry in my first episode.
If you had to recommend one episode that really defines what your podcast is and what you're all about, what episode would you recommend to someone?
It's hard to say for sure because it does kind of depend on the person. The very first episode was the toughest one for me. So I would probably go with that one.
Ooh, why was it the toughest for you?
Well, to be sad and honest, I dived deep into the passing of Bruce Mackey as well as Kenneth Zeller, the
Mm.
inspiration for the scene where Marco gets beaten in Pride. His passing and why that was so hard for Bruce, and a little bit of Linda's ignorance and not understanding that Bruce instantly knew it was because he was a gay man.
Yeah.
I feel like that's very important to a lot of Bruce's inspiration for all the queer characters, especially Snake's brother.
Yeah, Glenn Simpson. I remember when you told me that you're going to be starting the Bruce Mackey's Library podcast and listening to your first episode. I was so proud of you. The fact that you put in so much research. I learned things about Bruce Mackey's history and the origins of Degrassi that I never knew through your podcast. And I'm very, very proud of how far you've come. And now you're banging out the episodes. Now you're getting the books done. I'm very, very proud of all the work you've done through Bruce Mackey's Library. Very cool. I'm curious if in 2025 you have any podcast goals or plans with Bruce Mackey's Library. I want to
I
share.
would say my first one is the biggest, and probably I'm scared it might not happen, but I would love to interview a Degrassi author.
That would be really fun. I think you can make it happen. It's 2025. Dreams are coming true.
My dream is Susan Nielsen. I absolutely love her books.
I was going to say, I
And
was going to ask. I thought so.
not just the Degrassi ones, but she's written two of my favorite Degrassi books so far.
What are your other plans or goals?
I also want to interview more of my friends. I've already interviewed four, if you count Tom Melissa's as a friend.
Of course, it's Tom. It's a good goal. Anything else for 2025?
Another one is just, I feel like I haven't promoted my podcast enough. I am very nervous about it.
Why so?
Well, I have like a little bit of low self-esteem, a little bit of like, I'm still learning how to edit sometimes. I don't have a microphone at all. I'm
Mhm.
still hoping to buy one. That's one of my goals for sure.
I love that. I love how many goals you have. I think it's nice that you have kind of like a history of a few episodes banked up now. So when you do promote it, people will have time to go find it and go through it. But I understand that because my first episode is not great. I didn't have a microphone. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. And through practicing and putting out more episodes, you get so much better. So I think you should go guns a-blazing and promoting it. And I think people will find it who love it. And I think with every episode, you're just going to keep getting better and better as you have.
I mean, honestly, your first episode got me like instantly
I
because you
love
were
that.
capturing the exact amount of excitement that I had. And you were answering a lot of the questions that I had about, like, well, what do we know? Because I didn't really know anything.
And that's the same feeling that some people will find when they find your podcast is there's probably people who go, "Oh my gosh, there's all these books. What about them? Are they worth getting into? What's the backstory?" And you have all of that there right for them.
Yeah, and I have that link tree full of all the archive.org links that I could find. Took me a week and a half to make.
Kudos to you for putting in the research and getting it done for everybody so we don't have to go searching for it. If a Degrassi character was going to be a fan of your podcast, who do you think's most likely to listen to your podcast and why?
I'm going to say Casey Rothfels. She is an avid reader, and while it's more on the romance side, she does want to be a writer, and she's really big on history. You can tell from her episode, Lisa Makes the Headlines, where she's right making the paper with Lisa. And I feel like she's got that ambitious spirit, and she interviews people for the newspaper. And I've interviewed four people already, so that can help her kind of get the vibe for what interviewing is like.
I agree. Casey from the Kids at Degrassi Street is such a great answer. I think she would 100% be a fan of your podcast. I think that's a perfect imagery. And the most important question is how can people find your podcast and throw some support your way for 2025?
Well, right now I'm only on Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. I would say share it with friends. If you know someone who's into books or Degrassi, I would say share it with friends. And if you're not into the first episode, that's okay. It might be a bit of a slow burn, especially with Kids of Degrassi Street. But I'm going to get into Exit Stage Left and the character books this year. I
Hell
usually do one
yeah.
episode a month.
I love that. I know you've been pumping them out. They've been so good. I actually have one more question to ask you, which is how has being on the Degrassi Kid Network positively impacted your podcast?
You've helped me like kind of learn episode descriptions and how to do a bit more of a title that will catch someone's attention.
Mm,
A lot of the time I'll just do the name of the book, but sometimes I'll try to throw in a different one to make it seem more like of a mystery of what we're talking about and what's going to happen.
I like that. I like
So
that a
you've
lot.
helped me with that.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, A, for doing this podcast with me, but also being a part of the Degrassi Kid Network with me. This was something that I've experimented with. I had no idea how it was going to go, and it was really rewarding and fulfilling to help other people take their projects that they wanted to create and just give them some tips and tricks into how they can make the title more interesting or make the description a little more eye-catching. So it's been awesome to work with you. I'm still always going to promote your projects. Will also happily be a guest anytime you'd like me to be. But overall, thank you so much for helping me with the Degrassi Kid Network.
Thank you for helping me with this podcast, and you're always such a great friend to talk to.
You're a great friend to talk to, too. I'm glad that this brought us even closer together. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Degrassi Kid podcast, and best of luck with Bruce Mackey's library. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I want to say a huge thank you to members of the Degrassi Kid Patreon who have helped me support these podcasts in the Degrassi Kid Network. And don't worry, your Patreon subscriptions will continue to go supporting more people in our community. But first, I want to say a huge welcome to our brand new Patreon subscribers. Those are Layla Bell, Courtney, Mundo Man 333, D Scott, Sarah, The Wacky Deli, I Hate Your Friends from TikTok, so good to see you, Jupiter, Tawny, Emily Simmons, Connor, Sarah, and Justine Sutter. Thank you so much for joining the Degrassi Kid Patreon. It means so much to me. And thanks to your support, we're able to help podcasts like the Bruce Mackey's Library podcast, New Year, New Look, New Podcast, and Degrassi Schools. And this is my cat who also wants to come say thank you. We're also sending our shout out to our repeat members, our consistent subscribers, Glenn, Jolene, Amber, Angelica, Degrassi, CSI, Kylea, Nicholas, Sarah J, Shannon, Alyssa, Angie, Becca, Blueberry, Brittany, Katrina, Courtney, Dave, Evie, Gina, Jess, Joe, Joey, Catherine, Casey, Kennedy, Kristen, Laura, Lily, Lizzie, Megan, Mina, Nikki, Rachel, Racine, Sam, Stephanie, Taylor, Brittany, Jess, Lindsay, Randy, Alana, Chantel, Chrissy, Christopher, Emily, Honey, Jamie, Lizzie Games, Mackenzie Russell, Mike, Mix Lucy, Sarah, Shane, Sanita, and Tierney. Thank you so much for being a subscriber on the Degrassi Kid Patreon. I love you, and I'll see you next time.